Hi everybody. I just want to chat with you a little bit about Chapter 5 in your text this week on reform. This is a biggie, especially here in the state of Maine, well across the country, but Maine in particular, that education is really going through a kind of a crisis in terms of reform. You know, when trying to redefine ourselves, trying to find the best path for our students. And so there's a lot in this chapter, and it's really broad strokes, but really important stuff. And I'm going to record another video about Maine's reform, just so that you'll have a little more context for this. So this is sort of an overview of the chapter. So when we think about reform, one of the first things we have to think about is the purpose of school. You know, I've said in other places and other times that everyone's an expert on school reform because we've all had experience in a school and we all know what worked for us and didn't work for us. So we all think we have the best answer. Business thinks they have the best answer, the marketplace, because they have the mindset that schools should be run like businesses. Then we have you know, the mindset of parents who want to see school look like it did when they were in school, or some parents, not all parents. And so we have these competing ideas of what the purpose of school is and what it should look like. Your text gives you two broad areas of purposes of school. One of those is to transmit knowledge and to maintain a society. E.D. Hirsch wrote a book called Cultural Literacy, and in that text he wrote about the things, the stuff that everyone should know if you're going to be a citizen of the United States. And it really was a litany, a list of things that one should know. And we can argue that there are things that one should know. Should one be able to name the capitals of all the states of the United States, or even know all the states? Should someone be able to point to a map and know what country that is? I mean, there's an argument that, yes, that's what we need to do. But there's also the other side of that coin, that perhaps our society is broken and needs to be fixed. And so then we look at school as a way of restructuring society, of making a better world. Instead of maintaining the one that we have, is making it better. I personally think there's a balance between those two, that there are some things that are important for everyone to know, but we also have to think about who we're teaching to. We're not just teaching, you know, white Anglo-Saxon children. We have multicultural and many races and cultures and religions and ethnicities represented in this country. And so how do we balance all of that? You know, what do we say is important? You know, we could look at the settling of the West as a great thing for European settlers, but when we look at it from a Native American perspective, it's outright war and genocide. So how do we balance all of that? I mean, that's the big question. So are we maintaining society and transmitting a set of knowledge, or are we reconstructing society to make it a better place? And your text gives you the name of Paulo Freire. Paulo Freire was a Brazilian educator who very much believed in liberatory education, in that we learn together, we share together, and by the process of learning together, we raise ourselves to a higher standard. His book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, is a very difficult book to read in terms of syntax and theory, but it's also very good, and I would highly recommend it, or at least some excerpts from it. And then there's John Goodlad. John Goodlad wrote a book called A Place Called School. And when we think about what school is, you know, it's more than a building. It's a community sometimes. It's a way of thinking. Oh, by the way, I'm home, so you're going to probably hear my dog. You can hear it. That's Gabby in the background yakking away because she hears something outside. So you have to excuse that, sorry. And he said that schools really there were four kind of aspects of school. One was academics. One was vocational, you know, preparing students to work. Social and civic, you know, preparing students to be good citizens and be contributing citizens, and then personal, and developing the person, the self. And I think we would all agree that those four things are all part of school, but it wasn't always so. I mean, school at one time was reading, writing, arithmetic. It was basically academics. And we sometimes hear the call for back to basics, and that's sort of what it means, that, you know, get rid of all the other stuff and just teach kids academics. Well, that would be great in a perfect world if we had parents who were teaching some of the other things, if we had a society that was not as what's the word I want, as fast-paced maybe, and so forth. So there's a lot. So life is very different than it was when schools taught reading, writing, arithmetic. I think we have to acknowledge that. There's a quiz on page 132, 133 that you should take, just to kind of gauge what you believe the purpose of school is. And then there's the section on the history of reform, and it begins with a Nation at Risk that was published in 1983, and this was, our declining test scores. We were falling behind other industrialized nations, and the cry went up that we have to educate our children, otherwise we're going to be last in the world. So this idea of competing across the globe really drove some reform, and in that era there was an increased number of courses students had to take, and it became a testing era, more testing to see what our kids were doing. And then, of course, we have No Child Left Behind, that with the testing culture that has followed us into the 21st century. And now we have Race to the Top, which is not much better. We still have this climate of testing and evaluation, of competition, and so forth and so on. And so we can make the argument that maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's not a good thing either. I think we have to look at the whole picture to see, what is this doing to teachers and to students. And then there's some things that you want to pay real close attention to. Some of the reform movements, such as school choice. Our governor has championed school choice. Our former commissioner has championed school choice. The legislature has shot it down twice. School choice means that, if you don't care for the public school that's in your neighborhood, you can send your child to any public school. And that sounds good in theory, but there are some other considerations as well. For one thing, it's the money. The money that the state would have paid that school now goes with that child to another school. You start getting this flight from schools, and you're going to end up with very poor performing schools with very little money to improve. And it takes away the idea of a neighborhood school. That's what public school is all about. Charters, we now have charters in the state of Maine. We never had that before. And we have, and charters can be good schools, but they can also be poor performing too. I mean, we have to look at it. We can't say all charters are bad or all charters are good. There are some good and there are some bad. But charters were originally supposed to be part of the public school system, where a school district could begin a charter school to address certain issues. So if perhaps an alternative school or a technical school. But charter schools have been taken out of that realm now, and anybody can start up a charter school. They just have to apply the commission, but it's not in any way connected to a public school. They're separate. And again, what happens here is the money follows the child in the state of Maine. And then the vouchers. The voucher program across the country kind of took off and then kind of fizzled a little bit. I mean, it still happens. Our governor was in favor of vouchers so that parents could send their students to private schools, religious schools, and so forth and so on. And that has been shot down by the legislature as well. Magnet schools. We have a magnet school in the state of Maine, the School of Math and Science in Limestone. Then open enrollment. This is kind of like school choice, where you can go anywhere you want to go. And then virtual schools, online schools. Our state has banned virtual schools for the time being. We've had several trying to get a charter, and the commission has decided they need more information. They need to have some more regulations in place before they consider virtual schools. But there's a lot of them across the country. Schools for profit, this is huge. This is huge. And many of these virtual schools are schools for profit. And it sort of flies in the face of a free and public education. So, I mean, we all have our ideas about this, but there are things we have to think about, and how does this impact our public schools, and how does it impact us as teachers? Homeschooling, we've talked about that, and there's a movement towards homeschooling. And why is that? Why is it that parents are feeling they can do a better job than the public school system? I mean, it's a question we really need to face. Green schools, and then full-service schools, where it's more than a school. It's really a place of caring and health care and social work and so forth and so on. So I'm not going to go into each one of those details. I just want you to read about each one of them. And they're so very pertinent to our world today. And then I want you to think about the role of teachers and students in all this reform movement. Where are the voices of the teachers? Where are the voices of the students? We seldom listen to students, unfortunately. I think if we listened to our students more, we'd be able to figure this out. And if administration, government, think tanks, all these consortia and policy groups, if they'd listen to teachers, we might be able to sort it out too. But seldom are teachers and students invited to the table. So I'd like you to think about that and what maybe you might be able to do about that in terms of advocacy. Because teaching, isn't just being with kids all day long. There's, you do have to advocate for yourself as a professional. And then the text gives you 5 factors of effective schools, and we can debate these, and we can, not all research is good research. And your text does caution you to think about what some of this research means and where it comes from. But they outline 5 things: leadership, a clear mission, a safe school, monitoring student progress, and high expectations. So you can think about those and see what you think. But then beyond that, the text is, early start, starting kids early in school. And in today, our preschool and Head Start programs are getting cut right and left. Focus on reading and math. Yes, but I think some of those other subjects are important too. We can't look at just those and not others. Smaller schools and smaller classes, and we're going in the opposite direction. We're consolidating. We're closing small schools. Our class sizes are increasing. More learning time. And we can debate that. We are on an agrarian calendar in terms of school. Kids get summers off. This is a 19th century construct when kids were needed to work on the farm and so forth, and that doesn't happen anymore. But we continue with that agrarian calendar. Is there a better way to do it? I don't know. Better teacher training. I think we're getting there. I think we're learning what we need to do. Although I have to say that our state certification standards, for me, are very low. I think they've been diluted a lot, even since when I became certified as a teacher. The certification requirements for high school is minimal, and I think that's unfortunate. And even for elementary, it's minimal as well. And I think there should be a ramping up of that, so that we have the best and the brightest, and that our teachers are really well prepared when they go into the classroom. There needs to be trust. And that doesn't exist now. The public doesn't trust us. We don't trust the public. We don't trust administrators. Administrators don't trust us. There is this just climate of distrust and mistrust, throughout education. And then parents need to be involved, and we all know that. Parental involvement will go a long way in reforming our schools. And so the question remains: do we need to reform our schools? Are we moving in the right direction? Since schools were instituted, there has been this wave of reform, and I think that's just a matter of trying to get better, and trying to do better. And I don't know if this is the right direction. I have my own personal opinions about some of these things, and I'm not going to burden you with those. But I'd like you to really think about that. Are we headed in the right direction? Are the reform movements that are currently active in our country and our state the right way to go? Is there a better way to go? What is best for our kids? I read an article this morning in the Huffington Post that, no, it wasn't Huffington, it was another online, I'm sorry, I can't remember what it was now, but it was sort of this push to go back to the tough teacher. You all remember the tough teacher, the one that, that made you really work hard, that might not have been very nice, that was kind of grumpy and gruff, might have called your name or two, but you had to do what he or she told you to do. I didn't like those teachers. They didn't work with me at all. I don't like being told what to do. I want to be helped to do something. I don't want to be told what to do, and I certainly don't want to be called names. But this particular author was arguing that we need a little more of that strictness, more discipline in terms of holding kids' feet to the fire and making them or insisting that they learn instead of what the term was called mollycoddling them, instead of this sort of touchy-feely, everything will be all right kind of attitude. I don't know how I stand on that. I think there has to be some discipline and some rigor. I think there has to be caring too. You can't just be a disciplinarian. So think about that as well. And if I can find the link to that, I'll post that as well, and you can take a look at it. So I'd like you to think about all these things. Reform, yes, no, where do we go with that, and so forth. So have a great time this week reading the chapter, and just do some deep thinking about this, truly, because it's going to affect you as a teacher. It's affecting me as a teacher. It's going to affect you even more when you hit the public schools. And even if you end up teaching in a charter school or